Hi, and welcome to episode 170 of the Heartland Knits podcast. My name is Vicki, but you can find me as Heartland Knits on Ravelry and Instagram. And today is Sunday, June 25th, 2017. So let us start out with what is currently on the needles. And there has been a few things kind of on and off the needles. I've started things and ripped them out and started them again. And so right now I just have one kind of shawl on the needles. And that is using this really beautiful gold, shimmery and gold. It's a gold silk yarn from A Verb for Keeping Warm. And I am knitting a shawl. So a couple months back, I started a shawl out of this yarn. I started doing the Finkstrose shawl. And I was about maybe halfway through. I wasn't really sure. I had started it and restarted it a couple of times, and I was still struggling with whether I really liked the needle size that I was using with it. It's a neebling, so it has sort of a floral kind of design. But there were a lot of kind of more solid elements, and then the lacier bits around them, and I just wasn't sure I liked how the fabric was going to turn out. And then a friend of mine was knitting it also, and he ended up with almost 300 yards left, which, you know, this is like hand spun. I want to use all of it. It's about 1,100 yards, at least that's what the tag says. And so 300 yards left was just too much. And so I kind of let that, put it aside, and I didn't work on it for at least a month. And then I decided just the last couple days I need to get going on it. I want to have this shawl finished before I go to Meg Swanson's knitting camp at the end of next month. So I ended up ripping out that first shawl, and I've been sort of, looking through my neebling folios, looking through like all the different designs, trying to, estimate how many rows of a lace chart can I get out of this yarn so that it'll come out close, or if I would, a design that I might run out of yarn, how could I change the kind of the outer edges so that if I started running out of yarn, I could end it and it would look nice. So I'm still not sure of the one that I have chosen. Right now, I made a start just kind of late last night. I started it, and this is Gold Regan, and so this one looks like this. It's a more all over lacy kind of pattern, and it is meant to be representative of the laburnum tree, which has these kind of long panicles of kind of yellowy flowers. So here is my first little attempt at that. You can see I've got like the start of a leaf, and obviously I'm not doing mine as a circle, as a round. I'm doing it kind of as a half circle. So with this design, I think I'm happy with it on these needles. These are 3mm needles. But I'm not sure if this is going to be the final design. I'm feeling, because I love this yarn so much, a little bit like I did when I had that green handspun yarn, was it 2 years ago? And I kept ripping out shawls, and I did like 4 shawls, and I kept ripping them out because the design was not worthy of the yarn. It's kind of how I'm feeling about this. I'm not sure that this is just what I want, and so I have to do a little bit more thinking. I'm going to do a little bit more so that I get sort of the first little bits of kind of one of those more solid like areas, and just see what it looks like. And I'm not sure at all that this is going to stay, but I am sure I really want to have this shawl done by the end of next month. So I have to decide soon. I also have a shawl, the half pie shawl that I started out of hand spun. I started that, I got to, I don't know, maybe like the 3rd increase, and I didn't like the needles I was using for that either. So I ripped that out, but I liked the patterns that I was using. So I just basically have to get kind of that on back on the needles. The needles that I wanted to use for that sweat or that shawl were in use already. And so that's kind of why it started waiting. But that project is off the needles, so I can get that going. And that project happens to be the sweater that I'm wearing. This is the little Japanese sweater that I have been knitting. I bought the yarn for this at Yarn Over, and I'm really, really happy with how it came out. So let me stand up and show you. So this is sort of the little cardigan. It's just got this one button closure, and one major change that I did with this sweater is I did a picot bind off around all the edges. I don't know, it just made it, I don't know, a little bit kind of girlier or something. This is the amount of yarn I ended up with. I had 12 grams of yarn left, and this is Blush from Sun Valley Fibers in her MCN figurine weight yarn. It feels really nice and soft. I didn't do any kind of changes to the stitch count or anything, but I'm quite happy with it. Button closure, and I have a Sheila Ernst glass button that you know, it's glass, and I don't know if it'll show. It's like a paperweight button so that it kind of domes up on the top. So it's a little heavy for this like fingering weight yarn, so I wanted to stabilize it in some way, doing kind of a backing button. But this is a really pretty special handmade button, and I was worried about, you know, it losing it somehow. And I have, you know, had, you know, store-bought clothes that had like a backing button that have come loose and things. So I wasn't sure, you know, I really wanted to do that. I really wanted to use that kind of couture button technique where you to sew on the button, because I did that with my other glass buttons with the ribbon backing, and these were really secure. So I thought about just like, you know, I texted a friend and said, do you think it would look okay if I just had like a little square of ribbon that I hemmed nicely and you know, use that, sew that down? And she was like, yeah, no, not really. And so kind of Thursday night, in the middle of the night, I woke up thinking of something I had seen kind of in this box of trims and things that I had, you know, that my mom had. There was a whole bunch of stuff in the sewing machine bench that I didn't want to throw it away, but I just put it in a box and put it in a cover. If they were appliques, or if they were also trim that had been cut apart for something that she did, you know, maybe for a quilt, I don't know. But I found these, and I'll put a picture in, and they were like a little rose, like applique kind of, or a trim, like cut apart trim. But it was like a rose, and I thought that will be perfect. I did cut, there were leaves on the other side of it that I carefully trimmed off, and then I just sewed around the edges, and then it, you know, kind of stabilized that, you know, right there behind the button, and I could do that couture method. So the other thing that I did, also different from the pattern, and this is mostly because I did the picot bind off. It would matter like either way. I would have done this. Generally, just my own personal preference, I tend to put my button bands on and then my neckband. So the neckband is like a clear unbroken line, and you know, generally, and then the button bands, you know, are below that. So at the ends of the neckband, I pick up the edge stitches of the button bands. And that's just, I don't think there's a right or wrong. That's just what I tend to like. This sweater was done opposite that. You put the neckband on, and then you picked up the stitches along the edge stitches of the neckband to do the button band. And I didn't change that because at that point I thought, well, maybe I can figure out what they want to do with that buttonhole, and if it's there, it'll like fit in the stitch pattern right. But either way that you do it, there would be like a small area that kind of is the edge of your knitting. So for this one, the button bands were put on last, and so they were worked kind of out this way. But I wanted the picot bind off to go all the way around. So when I was doing the picot and doing the cast off, I picked up those edge stitches and then just did a picot bind off on them so that the picot runs all the way along. It's just I need to have them all the same. So anyway, yeah, so I'm really happy with the fit. I'm really the weather just sort of cooperated. I'm not really happy about that, but it's cold. It's probably lower 60s today. So I would just as soon it be nice and hot, and then I didn't have to wear this sweater right away, but it was ready. It was finished, so I got to wear it today. And then I do have another sweater to show you that I finished in April. And this is a sweater that I knit for Corey Eichelberger, who you might know as iRock Knits. And this was for her book, Minnesota 52, that she co-wrote with Megan Williams. And she had asked if I would do a sweater. She was coming up on they had a deadline of when the photographer was coming and when they, all the dates when they wanted the book published by. And so I said, sure, I can try to help out. And so I knit the sweater for her, but I gave it to her in April when I saw her at Yarn Over. So before I left, I recorded a little something so that you could see. So let me throw that in. Good morning. I have a finished project here to show you. I am recording this on Thursday, April 20th, because this sweater I am handing back to its owner kind of over this weekend. This is a design by Corey Eichelberger, who you may know as iRock Knits. She asked if I would sample knit a sweater for the book that she's co-authoring with Megan Williams, who you will know as Just for a Knit from the Stockinette Zombie podcast. They have written this knitting book, and she asked me if I would, knit something for her, and her timing could not have been better because I finished my blue shimmer bohus kind of on the Saturday, like on a Saturday, and then that Sunday, kind of just out of the blue, I got this message from Corey, asking, could you possibly knit me a sample? She knows I knit pretty fast, and I've done kind of stranded sweaters before. As these things always, happen when you're kind of up against a deadline and you need to have things finished. So I said, absolutely, I would love to. Just get me the yarn as fast as you can, because I knew I would be seeing her at Yarn Over, which is the Minnesota Knitters Guild event that will be this weekend. And so I knew I would be seeing her and I could hand it off to her in person. She, technically she said she didn't need this for a couple of more weeks, but I wanted to get it done. So I received the yarn kind of the following Saturday. And the yarn for this sweater was shepherd's wool. It is put out by Stonehenge Fiber Mill. And this is the background color is brown, and the owl colors are these three: light turquoise, dark turquoise, and this is called misty blue. So I think you get a kind of a better look at what those look like. I never used this yarn before. And it's, it's pretty nice. It's a nice kind of basic sort of worsted wool. It's a worsted spun yarn, so it's very smooth. And I didn't have kind of any issues. To me, it feels, it's a little bit like a Cascade 220, but it's softer than a Cascade 220. I think that's the worsted spinning. It's very sort of smooth feeling. So it's a top-down steeked cardigan. And one thing I will say, that if you're knitting it is that it feels incredibly small when you're knitting it because these bands are done afterwards. So, and these are about 2 inches wide on each side. So when you're knitting in the round, you got 4 inches of the circumference that aren't there. So it feels like almost like you're knitting a little child-size sweater. The body feels so small. So anyway, that is one thing to note, because these are usually, if you're doing a cardigan, it's maybe an inch like band and then they're going to overlap. And this is an open front. It is designed to be an open front cardigan. So this sweater is going back to Corey to use for, I don't know what she's going to do with it. If it's going to be in the book, if it's going to be for her, if she does, classes or trunk shows or whatever. I wanted it to be as true to the pattern as I possibly could. So I, tried to maintain everything as close as possible as I could. Though there is one thing I did differently, and that is I did a crochet steek. She had it written to do a sew-in steek, and I have done those before. But this is a really nice, like smooth wool. So I did a little sample where I crocheted one side of my little sample and I sewed the other side. And for me and like my machine, I cut it apart, and my sew inside, I kind of tugged on it a little bit, and it popped in a couple places. So it made me really nervous to do that on this sweater. So I did a crochet stick. She doesn't know that yet. I hope it's going to be okay with her. But I think it makes a really nice finished edge also with an open front cardigan, because you've got like a really nice finished off edge. I did tack it down so that it stays put. So the big thing that happened, so I did my swatch on the Saturday that the yarn. So I cast on for this on Sunday, the 9th of April. And I just knit as fast as I could. I really wanted it kind of finished by Easter. And I did actually get it done by Easter, the 16th of April, with a little provision that I had to go back. So I, got it completely finished, ends worked in, steek cut open, and when I put these bands on, one thing to really check is to make sure that you've got, like in this ribbing section, you've got the same amount so that they all like match up evenly. And I think I was picking up the second band kind of late at night, and I like checked it, and I had a different amount of stitches, and it was like 2 different. And so I thought, well, I'll just add this, add two stitches, it'll be fine. I added 2 stitches, and I did the whole band. Well, I should have subtracted 2 stitches. It was 2 stitches off, but I should have subtracted 2 stitches. So I ended up with 4 too many stitches, which, you might be able to hide that, like on a regular cardigan that has buttons or whatever. You might be able to fudge that. I don't know that I would, but you might be able to, but not on a sweater like this that needs to line up. So what I had ended up having to do, the steek was already cut open and everything. So what I ended up doing is I cut the band, the one band off, kind of in the middle of this lightest color. And then went back and tinked back stitch by stitch the last couple of rows, because I thought that would put a lot less stress on that cut edge, not having to, like pull as I was, pulling the band off. And, just very, very carefully, because I don't know if you remember, I did a steek show, and I said the one steek I had fail was I did kind of had to do something kind of very similar to this, and I had to go back on a band that was already on a cut, had already been cut. And I did not want that steek to pull out. And so very carefully kind of got those stitches back on, decreased the stitches I needed to on the, the first row, and got it reknit, and it's fine. And it's fine now. it stayed put. So I was really, really thankful that I had done that crochet steek, because that did make me feel like it was a little more secure. Um, so yeah, so basically this was knit just kind of according to, the exact measurements, the exact pattern. I finished up doing that band on Monday, and I soaked it, and it took a long time to dry. It's actually still just the very slightest bit damp. So it took quite a long time to dry. So I was glad that I got it finished up early, and it had all those days to dry, because so that I can pack it up tonight and take it up. So anyway, so I'm not sure what the name of this is going to be in the book. It had it had a title on the pattern, but I don't know if that was just a working title or the actual sweater design title that she's going to have. But anyway, my little owl sweater. Anyway, I hope you all have a really, really great day, and until I see you next time, with one of these shawls well on the way, hopefully, from my heart to yours, happy knitting!